Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with the advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
And please put unprofessional development in the "How did you hear about Podgo?" That will give us a little finder's fee. Thank you. Hello, unprofessionals. So as you know, now we're doing real commercials, not just the silly ones that we normally do. So today I've got with me my daughter Micah. Say hello, Micah.
Hi.
She has an Etsy account. It's called what?
Roo Makes Bracelets.
Roo Makes Bracelets, okay? We'll put a link in the show notes for you for sure. So she makes some friendship bracelets. She even has one that is kind of an unprofessional bracelet where she's made the unpro letters in the bracelet. So if you need a bracelet, go to Roo's Bracelets. Anything else you want to say about your bracelets?
No.
Okay. Well, she's a little kid. She's 11 years old. She's entrepreneuring. You know, support her. And go to Roo's Bracelets. Click the link in the show notes. Thank you. Say goodbye, Micah.
Bye.
Unprofessionals, we need your help. Mealy and I keep trying to explain to the world how special we are, but they won't believe us. Here's what you can do. Check in the show notes for the link to the People's Podcast Awards. And please nominate us so the rest of the world can realize exactly how amazing we are. Enjoy! Welcome, unprofessionals, to another exciting episode of Unprofessional Development. I'm Tedisco.
And I'm Mealy. And today we've got with us Pav, Wonder Woman from the Staffroom Podcast. And I'm not sure who we have as our other guest. Who do we have?
We got 106 miles to Chicago. It's a full tank of gas and half a pack of cigarettes. Hit it. You got Jim Guy from the Staffroom Podcast.
Nice.
But for your Canadian audience, you got Jim Guy A.
There we go. Exactly.
Yes.
Well, yes. Well, we know you're all about. Anyway. So we love having, I think this is our third Canadians. We've had the Making Math Moment guys, and we've had Shane from the Ed podcast. So,
yeah.
And we just got done recording one with a Scottish guy. So we've had California. So I don't know when we're going to get to Asia or Australia, but we're working our way around the globe. Okay.
You are going international.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
When we interview is either from Canada, the UK, or Pennsylvania, and we're from neither of those places, so I don't know how it keeps happening.
I will brag a little bit, and you guys are podcasters, and I don't know how much you look at your stuff and what all stats you've got and how long you guys have been doing it, because we can kind of get into that. But we actually technically have downloads in 28 countries now, and that just blows my mind that the internet works that way. And you're like, how did someone in Morocco decide to download this podcast? Like, I don't know anything about Morocco.
I remember the first time we saw, somewhere other than U.S. and Canada, and I was just like, how did we get there? Who told them?
So
very particular Google search.
Yes, I know. So in case you haven't figured out, Chey and Pav are fellow podcasters. They're up in Canada. I've met them on the Twitter and listened to their podcast, and we just had some different interactions. But before we get to that, one of you is a gym guy, and Pav, I should know what you teach, but I have no idea what you teach. I'm sure I've heard it, but then it didn't stick in my brain.
I'm the same. I got to ask her every morning. What are you teaching again?
Yes, children is what she teaches.
Give me a clue. Give me a clue.
I'm Wonder Woman. I teach everything.
There you go. So, how to block bullets with bracelets. That's always a good skill. And the lariat of truth.
Whenever people ask me, what do you teach? I just say not much.
Yes.
Not much. No.
Yes.
Nothing today.
No.
Definitely not.
No.
So we're ready for another day of free time. Free time.
Walk us through you guys' journey from, we want to, how you ended up in the classroom from whatever you were doing prior to you were in the classroom, and how did you decide to end up, just making a difference with today's youth?
Should I go first, Chey?
Yeah, go for it.
If you want to keep it professional, on point, organized, yeah, you need to go first, or they're just going to ask us to leave.
Sounds good. I'm Pav Wander, and I teach middle school math and science.
Okay.
But as an elementary teacher, we kind of touch on everything. How did I start off as a teacher? It was never really one of my long-term endeavors when I was growing up. Teaching was kind of the last thing that was on my mind. My degree is in kinesiology and health science, and I started working in pharmaceuticals in ergonomics, and so I was.
So let's pause just for a second and see if we can get Chey to spell kinesiology. Go for it, Chey.
GYMGIRL.
Gym girl.
Nailed it.
I wrote it down. I had a feeling this question was coming. The ultimate irony, though, of course, is that you're the trained gym teacher, and I have no training in gym other than just practical experience. So,
True.
Like every school, there's not a chance I'll teach what I'm trained in. But
there you go. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Back to
I'm
your
actually far more qualified.
Back to your story, Pav. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So I worked in health and wellness at a pharmaceutical, like a major pharmaceutical company here. And one of the people that I shared my office with was a teacher, a former teacher. And I did a lot of health and safety classes for new employees. And I loved that aspect of my job. And this is pretty early on. I think I was only graduated for about a year out of university. And so I loved that aspect. But the other aspect, when I would spend 6 out of 8 hours of my day in the file room, filing or, calling managers to get their training plans up to date, I couldn't do that part. But I loved being in front of the new class of employees and teaching a class and putting together stuff. So my colleague said to me, why don't you just, you love teaching, why don't you just become a teacher? Oh, it was like a light bulb moment. Oh, I didn't think I could do that. This is not something I ever really thought about. And so then I went to teachers college. I actually went just over the border. I went in the US and then got my certification done pretty quickly. And then that's the long and short of it. I got a job pretty quickly, which was becoming rare at the time. And then got in, and that was about 15 years ago. So, yeah. And phys ed, yes, I came out of university with a phys ed degree, and so I am a phys ed specialist. But but I've been overtaken by other gym people in the school. I love how you laugh. Thank you for laughing at that, Chey.
I'm just laughing at the fact that you're the fully trained gym teacher and actually know what it's called on a professional level. And I just go around saying, "Yeah, I'm the gym guy. I wear shorts to school."
Right.
Do the shorts come with the job? It's like getting a badge and a gun.
They do actually.
They have to match, though. You have to match. No matching shorts and top. Like, excuse me, what are you teaching? But if you come matching, they're like, "Oh, that's the gym guy."
They both say Adidas, so he's good.
There you go. So how did you get to become a gym teacher then? Like what's that? What is that like? Chey?
A gym question for me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, how did you become a gym teacher?
Once you said you were fully trained, I was deferring all athletic questions your way.
You just spaced out after that. It was all white noise.
There you go.
As a new teacher, my background was sports. Obviously, I played a lot of sports. Played university baseball. My way into teaching, if I piggybacked off Pav's questions, that I coached and I did summer camps, and it just became the natural evolution. You're actually pretty good with this. Why don't you find this as a career? So I had no idea to go into teaching. It was my boss at my summer camp and said, "You can't be a counselor your whole life, regardless how good you are. This is a profession where your skill set works."
Right.
So I had no dream, no idea, and someone who was a supporter of me really guided me in the right direction. But going to a new city, new school, the natural inclination was to want to coach, do the things that had sort of helped me get into the profession. So I coached a team here the first year. Second year, I coached another team. And then by my fourth year, I was coaching every team. And it was fun. It was energetic. And my administrator said, "You know what? You're doing all this coaching. Why don't we move you into middle school?" Because I was only teaching grade 6 at the time. "And you can be the gym guy." She didn't say gym guy. "You can be the gym teacher." So I sort of got into the job just by doing the extracurricular. And I actually wore a shirt and tie every day of my teaching starting career. I even wore a shirt and tie to teach the gym. I just thought this is the role. But of course, this is, 18 years ago. And then my principal said, what are you doing? I gave you the gym job. You can dress like a physical education teacher. I was like, okay, good. Because it's getting tough to run around in these dress shoes and pants and tie all the time.
What was the kids' reaction to seeing you in a suit and tie? Did they give you a hard time about that?
They don't see that anymore. This was like way before my time.
Yes.
I've never seen him in a suit and tie.
Graduation.
Okay, graduation.
No,
yeah.
but when you were teaching gym and with a tie on, were the kids like, what's wrong with you? Why?
No, in our school, in our community, there are very few male teachers in our building. So we have about 60, 70 staff. And right now we have 3 males. And back then we probably had 5 or 6 males. And so, and it's not even about being an authoritarian figure, but very few people in our community, Pav, you can support this or not, really ever challenge males. The community has the real culture in our community is that the male is the strong, dominant voice. So when you walk in, I'll very rarely get questioned about the way I'm looking or the way I'm acting. It's awakening for me when I got there as a young man, as a young teacher. But certainly it's part of our community heritage. Pav, you can dive in, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're completely wrong. No, I'm just joking. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
I get that though, because it took me a lot of, time to reflect on that as well. Like when I started and, I'd compare notes with other teachers. They're like, yeah, this kid just keeps acting up in my class. I'm like, oh, they never give me any problems. I wonder why. And then we see how they interact with also the girls and boys in the class. I'm like, oh, it's because they respond to males. Like it's absolutely something you just need to be aware of.
There is absolutely. He is completely right. It's a cultural thing where, the male in the family is usually the dominant figure. And because of that, it's just, they get a completely, male teachers in the school, even now get different behaviors than they would normally get from women. And also the fact that there are so few of them in comparison to females in the school. Yeah. They also get a little bit of a different it's refreshing to have a male teacher as compared to a female teacher. So they get a different vibe. Even in terms of responses from students, you'll get a little bit more of that lax attitude when it comes to comedy and being funny in class. The male teachers generally are known as the funnier, of the two. And so there's a little bit more of that back and forth. So definitely there's a difference with the way that males and females get treated as teachers.
You highlighted a good point there, Pav, because in our school, I just take for granted. I just assume someone's had a male teacher, but by the time I get to grade 8, 60%, 70%, 80% of my students have never had a male teacher. So it's a different dynamic for them that I will sort of forget over time or just assume that you've probably had a male teacher. But these are sort of the things that we're all talking about now, is really taking closer looks at the experiences of our students have. I just naively assume sometimes students have had a male teacher. How could they not have? And then I'm like, wait, I go to a staff meeting and there's 3 males. Of course they haven't had a male teacher. Oh, stop being a gym guy.
Do the math.
There we go. There we go. So walk us through, though, how the podcast came to be and whose idea that was and how you decided, what we're saying, it's not good enough for it to be in the classroom. This should be all over the world. So walk us through the genesis of the Staffroom Podcast.
So I've always been in the habit of exploiting my friends.
Okay.
And,
Good.
and, I grew up with a friend of mine who has a very successful podcast, and he's got a full studio. He's actually a real estate agent, but he's got a real estate podcast that's very successful in Toronto. Awesome. And he actually reached out to me and said, I'd like to do something. I teach in the same community where I grew up. So I was born and raised in this area. And so my first job was actually at the same middle school where I went as a student.
Oh.
And so, he reached out to me and he knew I still worked in the community. And he said, I'd like to do something to give back to the community. What are your ideas? Like, I know you're still very embedded in the community. What could these students benefit from? And my answer to him was experiential learning. Like if we can do something where you can involve your podcast and give them some exposure onto how people are using this platform to benefit their careers, this is eye-opening for our students, and this is something that's totally new. So we thought of a few ideas, and at the time last year, I was not teaching. I didn't have a homeroom class. I was doing Rotary Science, and I didn't have a class of my own. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't have a class, but I know somebody who has a class and would be all game to participate in something like this. And let me ask him what he thinks, and we'll go from there. So I brought this up to Chey, and Chey does Genius Hour in his class. So, giving students an opportunity to research pretty much whatever they want and present it in a particular way. And so I brought this up to him, and we thought this would be a really great culminating task for Genius Hour, put something together, just whatever you're passionate about. And we called it the Passion Project. And my friend Jazz, he opened up a studio, his graphics team, his copy editor, like everybody, professional videographer for the class, treated us to everything, brought us down to his studio. And the kids, they recorded a podcast episode that is now released under his podcast. It's one of the episodes. Awesome. So before the kids went on, they asked Chey and myself to do a segment with them that would introduce the episode. Yep. Well, our 10-minute segment turned into 50 minutes while we were talking. And so they decided to release that as an episode itself. And we just had such a great time talking about, some of the nuances in education and some of the things that we've experienced as teachers. We thought that this would be a great project for us, something that we could do. And so it kind of took off from there. And then my friend helped us out a little bit by getting us started and giving us some tips. And this is where you start. This is what you do. And it's just taken off from there. We've sort of just, loved the process and expanded and moved on and on. So I'll stop talking here because I've talked long enough. And Chey, you fill in the gaps where I've left them.
Yes, Pav is right. Is there any other potential gap? That's it. It was very organic. It was one of those things where things just happened to fall in place. We were very blessed by the opportunity. And then you just catch a fire sometimes, like out of nowhere, no sort of pre-planning, no idea that we wanted to podcast. We had this wonderful experience. And then Jazz and Laura and their whole team guided us. We had lunches with them throughout the summer, and Pav like, we wouldn't mind doing a teacher podcast. Maybe we'll do one a month. And Jazz looked at us and said, 1 a month? What are you talking about? 1 a month? And we never did 1 a month. We've been doing 2 a week, and early on we were doing 3 a week, and then it's just been totally organic because it just becomes, as you guys know, it's just fun. It's really fun.
It is so much fun. If you're listening and you're a teacher and you're thinking about starting a podcast, do it. Seriously, do it. Contact us. Contact Pav and Chey. Teachers like to help teachers. We will walk you through whatever it is, some of the nuts and bolts if you need that stuff, and just do it because it is just so much fun. And I mean, we just have a blast, and the interactions you get to have with other teachers and the interactions you get to have with the education world. And it also makes you just a tiny bit maybe better as a teacher, I think, if not a little bit better.
A whole lot better.
Because you think about
always thinking,
right?
Always thinking,
yeah,
right. And you hear or like you meet someone else and they go, "Hey, I did it like this." Like we still had this one. I'll refer to other episodes. We had this lady on her name's Batsheva. She has Overthrowing Education podcast.
Yeah.
Very good.
She was talking about she did this thing with Shakespeare where she had this kid write the characters going to counseling.
There was Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And she was writing as a marriage counselor.
If they went to marriage counseling, how would that go?
That.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I've never thought of that idea.
Yeah.
And from that idea, there's 900 ways you can dovetail that idea. You know what I mean?
So now Mealy has all of his kids read Macbeth in his math class.
Yes. Now, what happened if the square root of 3 and X went to counseling?
And why do you feel you're so irrational?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Get it?
There we go.
Yeah, I made a math joke.
Thank you. Good job.
Thanks. High five.
But it is that, like, I super highly recommend podcast, and me and Chey were actually in a little chit chat. We were piggybacking on each other on Twitter today, and there's so many different ones, and there's so many different flavors of teacher podcasts out there now there can always be new ones that we haven't thought of a different way to do it, and there's always new and creative ways to podcast about education.
Well, and speaking about that, so I'm really interested in sort of your process for Staffroom. So, because for ours, what we usually do is we say, let's find somebody more entertaining and bring them on and let them talk. And then every now and then we'll just shout from the peanut gallery like Statler and Waldorf and the Muppets.
Nice.
And but you guys, like, you do your research, and so how do you go about like picking a topic and figuring out like what you're going to examine for the week? Like, what is that process like?
So we used to, actually we still sort of do, we sort of talk throughout the week about, what might make a good a podcast, and sometimes we plan maybe a couple of days prior. We've always just really liked to be very authentic and real with our conversation. So we don't actually do a whole lot of planning. In the beginning, we would try and do as much research as we could. And we still do a lot of reading on the side to sort of boost our knowledge and statistics of things while we're speaking. But there's not a whole lot of planning that goes into our podcast episode. Lately, it's very much like we read the room. We sort of see what's happening in current events, and we sort of say, this is something that we feel like we should be talking about because it's something that we would want to take back into the classroom, and we sort of let that guide what we want to talk about for the week. And we use a lot of the conversations that we have, a lot of the research that we do, a lot of the articles and podcasts that we come across throughout the week to sort of take inspiration from or to discuss as well. But we are very, very in real time. So we record our podcast in one take. It takes us 35 minutes to record our podcast, and then within a couple of hours we do the minimal editing that's required and we release the podcast. So very rarely have we actually edited a podcast, and it's usually because something has interrupted our conversation. Like when we were recording at school, it was the school bell or something, or an announcement or something like that. So that was really the only time we edited. And so now that's sort of what we do, is we just kind of say, okay, well, this is something that's happening in society right now. This is something that's going on within education that we feel like we need to discuss a little bit further. And we do our episodes based on that.
We can totally edit that part out, where we said we don't get planned and organized, we just cut that. I don't want people thinking, Jimmy, I don't plan nothing, we gotta
yeah,
work
I never
that
said that. I said that we do some planning.
They cut out all those curse words they only use in Canada.
I know Pav touches on so many of the great things. Is that you want to say that was our plan, but sometimes you sort of accidentally walk into a plan. So when we started our podcast, we had very little gear. We had one mic, no headphones or anything. So why don't we just talk about what happened this week in school? And then this works. This is actually very reflective of what we just did. And ultimately we started to realize this is actually making us a better teacher when we sit back at the end on Friday night, reflect on your week. And sometimes we're referring to an article we've read that week, or sometimes we're referring back to a Twitter chat, or sometimes we're just talking about what happened during this day. And it was just very impactful for us as for our own professional development. So we actually never broke away from that model. When we started at first, people said, well, you should do this and you should do that and you should be interviewing people. And then all of a sudden we got to the point where we've actually found a really good groove.
There you
and
go.
We sort of by accident got here. So we haven't. So we do a segment called 3 Enlightened Minutes because we want to connect with people. But in regards to coordinating for interviews, we don't. We just record once. We try to get it out as fast as we can. It's probably because I don't want to edit. But in the long run, it's like you said, every teacher's podcast got a little thing that just makes it a little bit original, a little bit yours, and you feel good about that. So when people ask, how do you describe your podcast? It's like Shaq, Kenny, and Charles at halftime of the game. And we maybe don't know what we're talking about, but it's two teachers giving real-time reflections on what's going on.
There you
maybe
go.
it's wrong, but teachers teachers resonate with that. They understand that they might not totally get it in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so we're always comfortable saying, this is just how we feel right now. And maybe we'll read an article tomorrow morning and realize we were off. But it worked, and we got a good groove out of it, and we felt it was impacting our teaching. And if we're better in the classroom, then we're not going to change the model up.
That kind of reminds you of something. It was interesting. Well, two things. First of all, the one is I remember listening to a podcast about Oprah Winfrey, because she's my hero, and which still I know things people weird, but Oprah really is my hero. And I'm really going to try
legitimately.
Legitimately, we're gonna work the Tony Danza angle. I'm gonna try and get Oprah on this podcast.
Definitely, but anyway, she'll totally be on our podcast.
She will, of course, she will. I mean, why not?
Once you drop the Tony picture, she's in for sure. She's like, "What? You've had Tony Danza? Yeah, I'm
right.
What, you have something better to do?
Right. He ain't the boss. I'm the boss.
He's the boss. She's the emperor.
She's the emperor. You're right.
So, but one of the things that she said was that she learned early on when she was doing her show, and they were kind of like finding their, who they were as a show. She said, once we figured it out, we had like a motto with the Oprah Winfrey show, and it was stay in your lane. And like there would be other ideas like, well, why don't we do a show like this? Or why don't we do a show like that? And then it would always come back to, no. This is what the Oprah Winfrey Show is. We do like A, B, and C, and if we don't do D, E, and F, and that's what we do. And I think that also applies sometimes in the classroom. I remember having like a post observation, and I had issues with classroom management. This is like my second year maybe, and I was having some challenges. And I said, I really wish I was like teacher X, and this teacher could walk in the room and just, don't mess with me. I'm like the alpha male. I'm like, everybody better be quiet because like the tough guy is in the room. And I'm like, I wish I could walk in the room like him. When he walks in, everyone knows that he's the thing. And the administrator said to me, you have to do you. You can't be somebody else. You have to be you. And so whether it's as a podcast or whether it's a teacher, and we can all grow and improve and learn things, but it has to be authentic and it has to be who you are. So if you try and be, this podcast, or you try and be this teacher, it's not gonna work. And so I've found my way of managing the class that works for my personality, and that's what it works for me. So I think that
reminds me, Mealy, I want our next episode to be a musical.
Well, I think that's a good idea. Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Let's try new things all the time.
Oh yes, that would be awesome.
Constantly switching lanes without an indicator. Just go.
Yes. All right. And we could also possibly do it all in Pig Latin. There'll be another episode.
Okay, Way. I'll bring my ukulele. All right. So I wanted to ask you guys about this little motto here: inspire, don't require. So could you just explain to people out there who might not know? So what exactly is that, and how can we use it?
I made it up. It just sounds catchy, brings people into the podcast, but really, I don't really know much about it. Like,
it does rhyme, so it rhymes. It must be cool.
Don't ask me a question beyond the rhyme, eh? Like that just hooks you.
The bumper sticker makes itself.
We love to think that everything we do and create is based on a positive. But the inspire, don't require actually sort of the byproduct of negative experiences. And we won't necessarily mention any names, but when you've been teaching 20 years, you don't always mesh with everyone around you. Uh-huh. So I had a few people that were not liking my style. Okay, that's fair. And then it just became I'm gonna nag you and make everything a requirement. So you can give me 350 minutes of free extracurricular all week, but you know what? No. Stop that. And I want to make sure you have a 6-minute lunch duty. Okay. Mm-hmm. Even Pav could do the math for me and tell me it doesn't really benefit the school to trade 350 for 6. But that's fine. But it just became this always on and not to blame anyone. Like, let's just assume both of us just had personalities that didn't match.
Right.
But what it became for me was like, well, inspire me. Like instead of requiring me to do everything, inspire me. And then it just came into this little after school rant with Pav one day. Inspire, don't require, like honestly. And then we just sort of use it all the time. So, you know what? You like to think everything's always from a positive, but sometimes we really get propelled and pushed and sort of find some creative juices when things aren't necessarily going our way. So I won't place blame on anyone. It was just one of those moments where two character traits just weren't matching, just weren't synergizing.
He inspired you by requiring. He used the require to inspire.
I guess in this case, it sort of worked.
This does go down as the meanest thing a Canadian's ever said. But
This isn't being released in Canada, right? You can stick
No, we
other
yes.
29 countries you got nailed down.
but Morocco.
They're going to love this. They're like, oh, those Canadians.
No, but I know exactly what you mean. Like, there's so many times there's so many pushes, and sometimes it's from admin, and sometimes from district, and sometimes it's from the federal level. Like, but there's so many of these pushes, and they forget to get teacher buy-in. Right. And the same thing also goes from within the microcosm of your classroom. Like, it's great to say, like, okay, we all need to do this, but if you don't explain to your students why it needs to happen, and they don't care, then they're just going to push back because nobody wants to do extra stuff. We're all lazy by nature. I want to do the bare minimum all the time. So if I don't have a reason to do the extra, I'm not going to.
Yeah, and then you hit on that other key aspect of this is the why. So I think a reason why it caught on so much with so many teachers is because it plays into the whole, why are we doing this? Why are you a teacher? Why have you chosen to teach your class in a particular way? I think that really resonated with a lot of teachers. And so, we also use a lot of Simon Sinek's work, Start With Why and his TED Talk on why. I know Chey uses it with his class a lot. And just sticking to that focus, that sort of the why behind everything just makes that motto really come alive and really be able to apply it in so many different scenarios as well.
We do use it authentically in the classroom. If I'm talking with my kids and I say inspire, they've got it for me to finish it off. Don't require, Mr. Cheney, we got it. So it becomes a cute little hook, but it does become a principle that I could actually talk upon. I could say I do use it in the classroom. And I think even part of our podcast resonates the same thing. Anything we're really talking about isn't because we've solely read a book or solely read an article. We've practiced it in class. We've tried it in class. You have your mission and you have your vision. I think everyone in our building knows that's sort of our catchphrase. And beyond the catchphrase, it's a principle. It's our guiding principle. Can I inspire you? It'd be nice as a teacher to say it always works, but we know it doesn't. You can't always inspire everyone with every single task. You just have to hold on to it as an override guiding principle, work it, try it, differentiate, but then realize sometimes it's not always going to work. And you have to be honest with that. You can't go around saying, well, I inspire everyone all the time. Like, that's who I am. Like, get over yourself, Jim Guy. We know that's not true. And you have to be realistic. We all have high goals, high expectations, and we differentiate to try to inspire and ignite, but it doesn't always work. Of course not.
It's cool, though, is that when you have those little things in your classroom, whatever they are, and inspire, don't require, whatever it is that you do that, and you share it with your kids, that builds in like an accountability. Because if you start drifting from that, the kids will call you on it, and they'll be like,
oh, yeah.
What are you doing?
They do.
I like this. I suck at grading. Like, I'm... Yes, I know how to.
Period.
I know how to grade.
You gave me an R.
I can put red ink.
Letter.
I can put red ink on a piece of paper. I got that, and we're not going to get into the red ink versus blue ink debate. That's for another podcast. But what I told my kids was this year. I said, listen, here's the deal. When you turn in an assignment or when we take a quiz or a test, if I don't get the grades back in 3 days, that's 5-point bonus on the test or quiz for you. And I didn't have to give it out much because they were like, oh, Mr. Mealy, you didn't get it back to us. It's going to be 5 points if you don't get it back to us tomorrow. And I'd be like, okay. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do this because, not that I don't want my kids to have points or whatever, but I'm like, okay, this is holding me accountable. So if you can find ways, whether it's a little saying, whether it's something you put on your board and they go, oh, you didn't do this. I thought you were all about blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, we're going to, this is what the way this classroom's going to run.
I'm very surprised that they didn't conspire together to decide not to tell you.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, they're
smart. They're not that smart.
Right. Well, the one that said it, you always get that one kid, right?
Yeah.
You're going to collect the homework. Shut up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're right about that.
We're punching you outside, moron.
When I was in school, we used to call those the discos.
Yes. This is something you always can do. I only do it like a couple times a year. But I'll collect something for the sake of collecting it, and I try not to use it as a classroom management technique, but I think every teacher at some point or another has used, I'm going to collect this for a grade as a way to settle the kids down. It is not a good way to do it, and it's not pedagogically sound, but there are times where
that's the problem. Is it works.
It does.
I talk with this. I get my kids all the time. I said sometimes it's unfortunate because I always say like it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And I've always talked with my students. As soon as you immediately respond to that type of assignment or task, you're just going to get them more and more and more. So I don't necessarily know who's to blame per se, but as a teacher, you always know this. I could pull out this ace anytime. Hey kids, look at this.
Well, I'll say this: it gets productivity, but not always learning. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
It gets quiet time. It's busy time.
Because they're like they're copying, they're cheating, like I'm collecting this for a grade, and all of a sudden it's like and so I like literally tell my students like, are you going to collect this from a grade? I'm like, all that's going to do is make you guys copy from each other. I don't want you to copy. I want you to learn. So just do it because you're going to do it. But I was going to say is what this is just a little teacher hack for those if you haven't done it. And if you haven't done it, you need to do it because it feels really good. Collect something up, and when the kids leave, throw it in the trash. Oh, so much fun. And they're like, and if you want to, give them all 100 on it. Whatever, one grade for 100 out of like 30 things you grade over however many times. It doesn't move the meter. They don't know that. They all feel good. And then if you give them all 100, even the kid that didn't do it doesn't go, hey, you didn't give me 100. I didn't do it. Like, why'd I get 100? Like, no one asks you when it's being graded after you throw it in the trash and give them 100. So.
No, because they forgot about it too.
Yes. Yeah. So, we like to teach unprofessional tips here on Unprofessional Development, and that's a good one. I joked
with my students once. I said, are you going to mark this, Mr. Cheney? I said, I'm a professional educator. I know what your mark is already.
Nice.
There you go.
It took me like 2 or 3 years of teaching before I figured out I don't have to grade everything.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Once I figured that out, suddenly my weekends opened up.
Yes. I forget who told me that.
In time to start a podcast.
Exactly. Someone's like, I forget, it probably like the first second, it's like, you can just throw this in the trash. I'm like, what? Yeah. They're like, yeah, just throw it in the trash. I'm like, oh, I did. And I'm like, no one said a word. I didn't get in trouble. Nothing happened. So we want to get to something here. I know, cause like you guys dominate the Twitter. I got my toe in the water on the Twitter, but you guys like live in the Twitter. Do you guys ever sleep? Are you like super caffeinated? Anyway.
Jim Guy takes 2 scoops of dry pre-workout and a little shot of water.
Okay. So for those
it's probably not healthy. Not healthy, but it keeps me up all the time.
Nice. For those of us that are listening and maybe don't know, describe what a Twitter chat actually is, because you guys moderate them, I guess, more times than not, and then you also participate in them. But describe to someone who's not on the Twitter what an actual Twitter chat is and how it works.
On Twitter you're only allowed to scream.
Yes.
Only when you use all caps. Yes, you can actually do a Twitter chat in all caps.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, okay, good.
Twitter chats, they're actually something we didn't even know what they were when we got on. We've been using Twitter as teachers for a really long time, for years and years, but we only really started diving into Twitter since we started the podcast. And it's a whole other world. Mm-hmm. It's like the deep web of Twitter. When we joined our first chat, it was the most overwhelming experience that I ever experienced. It was so fast. There were so many things coming at you at the same time. So what it is there's a hashtag that people use to talk about a particular topic. So they will ask a couple of questions. A fast chat will either be 30 minutes or an hour long, and there will be about 3 to 7 questions based on the length of the chat. And whoever is moderating the chat will ask questions, and you just answer them within that 30-minute block, let's say, for example. So a question will come out, and you answer it with A1 at the start of your answer, and then you include the hashtag for that particular chat. So let's go with Education Never Dies is one that we run every couple of weeks. And so you include the hashtag Education Never Dies with your answer and with the question and all the responses, and everything just gets collected together. So you can follow the entire thread just by following that hashtag. And so there's lots of great questions about pedagogy, about anything to do with education that people will talk about, things that are happening in the world right now. And then you just answer those questions and everything gets collected together and you respond to other people, you read other people's answers, you get some more ideas about that particular topic. And we've done a lot of learning through Ed Chats since we joined Twitter. It was actually very eye-opening about how much information gets shared during a chat. But it can be pretty overwhelming if you're not used to it. So
yeah, it took me a while to learn to navigate. It's like someone puts you on the dance floor and they all of a sudden they start doing a line dance and everyone's going left and right and forward and backward and spinning and doing hand motions and you're like, what do we do? Where do I click? Where do I put my thing? Who do I, and you get the hashtag and the A1 and the Q1. Because I would recommend the first time you do it, mostly just try and read.
Just watch. Yeah. And just read. That's probably some great advice.
And then maybe reply here and there to like something that inspired, like to something that like goes, oh, I like that idea, or I tried this myself and I've done this and stuff like that. But yeah,
they can be frustrating because they do move really fast, but it's also tough to get embedded into a chat. I remember when we were just sort of dabbling, like no one interacts with us. No one likes our tweets. We're knocking on the door and no one will answer. And so they can be a little frustrating because teachers don't ever want to say that they're not, welcoming everyone, but you get so used to the same people in chats that it did take us a while that we sort of felt like our voice meant anything to a chat. Yeah. And this isn't because anyone was malicious, but it's just if you sort of dive into a chat and you don't get a great first feeling, I would agree with you. You don't always get a really great feeling diving into a chat. It's sort of the long haul. You sort of have to embed yourself in the chats over and over. And then I would almost, I would push Pav's thought even further is that most of the really rich learning comes in sort of making those connections on the Twitter chat. The Twitter chat probably has mild level of information, but when you start chatting with people multiple times, then you become a Voxer group, and then you have voice notes, or then you become a Twitter chat on the side, and so the conversations expand from there. So Twitter is almost like it's a little gateway to connect with people, and it's a gateway to further your knowledge. Because some people will give you pushback that the chats can be a little frivolous, and sometimes they can, and the content's not deep. And sometimes you're right, but it's sort of like it's that long-term approach to it, and realize that if I build some relationships, then I can get somewhere with it. Like in today's world, talking about anti-racist education, some of our chats have been about that, but some of our Voxer chats have been really about that, and you really get much more meaningful conversation. People are a little bit more authentic because they're not totally as nervous on the Twitterverse. But the only reason that Voxer group existed is because we've been part of the same chats over and over and over again. Yeah. So that's sort of
built up a professional learning network is what happens. Is you build up that group of people that you always go to sort of act as your sounding boards and talk to about these kinds of conversations and people that you trust, essentially, because, our PLN might be different from another person's PLN.
Yeah.
Is that what PLN stands for?
Professional Learning Network.
Okay.
I just kept saying, when's the plin? When's the plin? I'm ready for the plin.
I'm much of a planner.
With other and Twitter, as with a lot of other places, but Twitter, definitely, and like all social media platforms, and even professional development that you go to in your school or you go to a conference or whatever.
Yeah.
My philosophy, and a preacher said this to me a long time ago when we were talking about some other preacher that we had both listened to, and he said, "Eat the meat and spit out the bones." And depending on what part of Twitter you go to, sometimes it's full of meat and like just delicious, and sometimes it's like almost all bone, and you got to really get down and figure and find the meat. Some people on those chats are just there to hear their own voice.
Oh yeah.
So you have to learn who those people are and go, oh, okay, that's who that person is. That person just likes, saying things. Just like we know at meetings, when we go to staff meetings, there's that one person that wants to raise their hand just to go, well, in my classroom, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no one cares, okay?
So you have those too in the U.S.?
Yes. Shut up. We want to go home. We don't care about your classroom.
Franchises.
Yes,
we're not
10 minutes after the end, but I just have a quick question.
I always I'm going to keep this short. Too late, or you wouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Let me begin my 4-part question with an anecdote. When I was
you know what the Twitter is it we've benefited from Twitter, but it is tough to navigate. When people ask me to describe Twitter, I always think of Allen Iverson. Are we talking about Twitter? Are we talking about Twitter? Like for real? I like Twitter and I engage in Twitter. We've made good connections, but ultimately the real learning, the real growth, the real problem solving comes with my 80 staff members and it comes with my 30 students. And I'll come to Twitter and I'll get some ideas and I'll make some connections and I'll make some great connections. But like, no one tweet has ever come back to reflect directly in my teaching. So when people go off about Twitter, I'm like, talking about Twitter, bro? Come on.
You got to take it for what it's worth.
Alrighty, so we're almost out of time here, but we always like to have funny, silly stories from the classroom. So anything that like goofy that happened in your classroom, where I don't know, a kid came in with underwear on his head, or goofy things. I taught a complete lesson once. I taught a complete lesson, like when the period started at 9, and by 9:40, I taught the entire time, like with no breaks, no snack breaks, like, and I stayed to curriculum. Like I did that once.
Funniest story I've ever heard.
No way!
I was like, this curriculum thing's kind of funny. Like, I know what to do now.
It's the perfect game, man.
Yes.
Pav, I'll share one. In our school, we have a snack program, and an extension of that is we don't really get picky about when you want to eat your middle schoolers. Like, if I want to take a bite of my protein bar, I'm going to take a bite of my protein bar. So that sort of culture in the school, no problem. You eat when you need to eat. We're not going to cause no grief. And so students said, hey, Mr. Cheney, can I go get a snack? I'm like, of course you can. Why you ask me to go get a snack? So I turn my back, working with some students. He comes out, comes back. I turn around, and there he is. And he's eating a hamburger from Burger King and Whoppers in the full wrapper. And it's 9:35 in the morning.
Nice.
And I said, where did you get this? He goes, no, I got 2 last night, Mr. Cheney. I wanted one for snack this morning. I got nothing to say. Great. Perfect. You planned this ahead of time. You got yourself 2 burgers from Burger King the night before, knowing you wanted one for 9:30 the next morning. I tip my cap to you, sir. Well played.
That is good stuff.
A friend in high school who, he came in one day eating a burger from McDonald's, and like the teacher gave him like that stereotypical line of, "Oh, did you bring enough for everyone?" And he had this big problem with his teacher. So one day he decides to come in and he's eating McDonald's again. She goes, "Did you bring enough for everyone?" And he opens up his backpack and dumps a pile of burgers on her desk.
Nice.
Bought 30 spite hamburgers.
Nice.
Dumped them on her desk, and he got suspended, and it was so worth it.
Oh, that is good stuff. That's really, really good
I can't believe
stuff.
he got suspended for that. That's the kindest thing that he could have done.
How charitable.
I know.
No.
I don't know if I have any specific stories like Chey's. I mean, surely things have happened like that in my class. It's just, I don't hold on to them. This year, I teach 2 classes for math. I teach Chey's class, which is a grade 8 class, and then I teach my own class for math. And the class that he has several students that I taught when they were in grade 6. So they know me very well. And when it comes to, being a funny teacher, I consider myself to be pretty funny with my class. Like, I build that sort of relationship with them, and we make jokes and we talk about things, and we're very, low key, and we have real conversations in the class, and it's great and it's fun. They know that I'm funny. So his class knows me really well. This year, I have a class of all new students that I've never taught before. My jokes fall completely flat with my own class.
Oh.
It's like crickets. Crickets. So I will do my shtick with my class for homeroom. Like, guys, it's stand-up hour. Let me do my shtick with you. Crickets. And then I go downstairs and I'll just tell Chey when we switch our classes, his class is getting ready to come upstairs to me, and I'll be like, they don't find me funny, and it hurts my feelings.
Oh.
And then I get his class that comes upstairs, and we're all just rolling and having a great time and just laughing at everything. And I told them this year that I was going to ruin every slang word that they use, because I'm going to use it in my regular vernacular.
Straight fire. That's lit.
That's lit. I use that. And then I use all kinds of things, like Hundo P was my favorite.
Nice. Keep it Hundo.
So it was like, Miss, did I get that right? Hundo P, you did. And they were just like, Miss, stop, please. Just stop.
I break out the old school. I'm like, oh, that's wickety whack. And they
No, but they expect that from you. They don't expect you to say, nah, bruh.
No.
Right? So
nice. Oh.
And those are the little things that I remember because you know you gotta make fun of yourself a little bit.
So speaking of snacks and stuff like Tedisco, so it is my first year, and this was kind of bold for me to be a first year teacher to do this, but whatever, I'm a goofball. So it's against the rules to sell candy in school, right? But I don't know if you get your schools have it, because we teach like upper teenagers. There's the candy man, you know what I mean? There's drug dealers in school, which obviously that's bad. But then there's the kid who goes to Costco or Sam's Club and buys like this candy, these big things, and then sells them for like $1 a piece out of his book bag, right? So I had this kid. So the candy man was in my class, all right? He had a backpack full of candy all the time. And so I noticed it. And so option 1 is to write him up, call home, do all these disciplinary things.
The things you're supposed to do.
Right, the things that that a teacher's supposed to do. So here's what Mealy does. I have him stay after class. I say, hold on just a second, come over here. I go, hey, here's the deal. You can sell candy in my classroom. Here's what needs to happen. All sales need to happen before the bell rings so that the kids are sitting down and started on their work when the bell rings. Number 2, there is a Milky Way on my desk every single day.
Wow.
A little skimming a little off the top.
Yeah, baby, I'm working this. You know what I mean? So I probably gained a few pounds.
Tax.
Yes.
That's authentic learning if I've ever heard of authentic learning.
Welcome to it, baby. That's how this goes. Okay. Oh, so that's another teacher tip you guys can use if you have the candy man in your class. So
your story reminded me of I had a class last year in the fall where I use a lot of self-deprecating humor. I tell a lot of jokes about myself and whatnot and make a lot of jokes and let the kids joke about me too. And so I would make these jokes this class, and there was just utter silence. And I think they were just genuinely concerned about my well-being and my self-esteem. I think they were just truly worried about me.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, this is the sense that I get. It's like, what?
Is this
thing on? Like, what's happening here? I'm funny.
I swear I'm funny. I tell myself every day.
Oh, you need to buy a little.
All our social emotional teaching's been working because our kids are getting to middle school and they're so empathetic to our teachers. They want to make sure they're okay. Like this has to be a good sign, right?
That's right.
Let me tell you about some of the comments I get from my students. I'm going to doubt that. Just those particular clusters, but the rest of them will walk up to me and going, "Hey, Mr. Disco, you pregnant?
Oh,
what trimester are you in?"
baby.
And I tell them, "Yeah, if it's a boy, I'm naming him Papa John's."
It's cold. Oh. So, and do you ever do the comeback? Like, I can lose weight, but you're still going to be ugly? Did you ever?
Yeah, I tell them if it's
you have to know your principal very well.
Yes.
Yeah. And the students, they go to them sobbing, just be like, "No, God, it's okay. It was funny."
Yeah.
They don't tend to like that excuse.
Oh. Alrighty, so I think we have done an awesome job with this podcast here. So thank you guys so much for coming. And we're just a blast, and we will make sure. Tedisco always likes to ask, do you have a place where people can reach you? Yes, Tedisco. On the internet, that's where they can reach them. Okay?
Yes, on Twitter, yes.
It's the Staffroom Podcast, and it's Pav Wonder Woman and Chey Jim Guy. So you searched any of those things, and well, this has been so much fun, and we just appreciate you guys being here, and we appreciate you guys listening. So please do check them out, follow them on the Twitter, do all the things that you do when you hear someone that you enjoy, and get the stuff that they bring to the table. All right, find out what's happening in their lane, as have them inspire you. All the cliches I can pull out. And as we always remember, boys and girls, stay unprofessional.
Unprofessionals, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to our sponsors and our guests. Next week, our guest will be Scotland's own Chris Smith. So enjoy a taste of the future with Chris Smith.
All right, so I see your journey from being such a young little nerd and turning into a professional teacher. So then, Yeah. So how did you make the leap then from being, that classroom teacher to starting to put out this newsletter and starting getting YouTube presence? Like what was sort of the push for that?
If I'm being honest, the newsletter was born out of necessity to get a job. So after you qualify here in Scotland, you get given 1 free year. You get a year placement in a school, and if that goes well, then you qualify, and then after that, you apply for jobs elsewhere. So I started as a teacher in 2006. I wanted to convince people that I was employable, and so I decided I would start this newsletter, and it wasn't this global thing. It's a tiny thing. It's geared towards the 12 other maths teachers in our department. It's telling them about things that are happening. It's telling them about good lesson ideas, sharing within the 12 people. It's giving them puzzles to use, and it told us the important stuff like the milk rota. So that's who's bringing in the milk for the fridge. And I can't believe that 13 years on, 3,500 people know that it's David on milk this week.
Yes, I'm glued to the who's going to be on the milk rota next week. That's forget the puzzles, boys and girls. If you're listening to this podcast, you don't like math, still get the newsletter to find out who's bringing the milk to the kids, because it's better than
milk info.
Right. It's so much better than
my milk rota brings all the boys to the yard. Oh dear.